Hi everyone, I'm Jeremy Bond and welcome back to the Unity Certified Programmer Exam Review video material. In this video, we're going to be looking at a solution to the challenge that we gave you to come up with a components and classes diagram for Asterix. Now, we're going to be looking at a solution. You could have all sorts of solutions. You could have drawn this on a napkin, you could draw it on a whiteboard, that's fine. My solution is a very clean diagram file because I'm teaching you and I need to make it as clear as possible. But yours just needs to be for you. And what I've done here is I've really tried to cover everything that we're going to see in courses 1 and 2. So let's take a look at the diagram now. In here you can see at the top I've got some notes, and there are several different kinds of lines in this diagram. A black line denotes a parent-child relationship in the Unity hierarchy. So for instance, space background and screen bounds are both children of the main camera. A green line shows anywhere that one game object is instantiating another. So for instance, when the player ship fires a bullet, it instantiates that bullet. The light purple arrow is a class pulling information from or calling another class. The directions of these arrows are as accurate as I could be, but don't get too worried about that. The purple line really just shows a relationship between the two different classes. If you see boxes stacked together, that means that those are all part of the same game object. One of the things I do a lot in Unity is make several components on the same game object, and that allows me to think in a component-oriented way as I'm designing my code. And then finally, Asterix, the main script for the game, is so commonly used that I've created this sort of outflow of information from Asterix, which is the orange arrow out to the open circle, and inflow of information to Asterix is the solid orange circle with the arrow into Asterix. So in other classes, you will see when the class is getting information from Asterix, it's an open circle with an arrow pointing in, and when it is passing information to Asterix or calling methods on Asterix, it is an arrow pointing out to a solid orange circle. There are some common components that you're going to see throughout this diagram. The most common is active only during some game states. This is a component that I'm going to create that causes whatever it's attached to go inactive by doing GameObject.setActive to false in certain game states and go active in other game states. And the game state is handled by Asterix. So all of these, they watch Asterix and they actually register for notification from Asterix when the game state changes. The next is ship part, which is notified here by a S part in a kind of greenish rectangle. And a ship part is a turret or body part of the ship. These are replaceable components that are just art, and they are replaced in the same way. So they both have ship part components. And then OSW in purple or pink is off-screen wrapper, and that is the thing that allows asteroids, bullets, and the player ship to wrap around. And that I went ahead and just did off-screen wrapper in purple as opposed to just the OSW. So let's start with the main camera. The main camera holds Asterix. I tend to do this a lot in my scripting just because that way, anytime I open a project and I want to find the sort of main script for the game, I go to the main camera and it's there. It also has the achievement manager, the ship parts dictionary, which holds the scriptable objects that define which sort of things are bodies and which things are turrets in the different parts that we import as models. The save game manager, which is actually going to save the game out to local files and can load it. And then the custom analytics tracker, which sends our analytics data out to Unity Analytics Online. Children of main camera include the space background, which has this scale sprite to fill orthographic camera, very long name for a component, but what it does is it takes any sprite and it scales it to completely fill an orthographic camera, as you might imagine. And then screen bounds, which are used by the off-screen wrapper. This defines the area that a cube collider takes up as a trigger And anytime something leaves that area covers the entire play area of the game. And anytime something completely leaves that trigger, then it is wrapped around to the other side of the screen using the off-screen wrapper. You can see that Asterix instantiates many different asteroids. These are always the parent asteroids. So if there are 3 starting parent asteroids in a scene, Asterix will instantiate 3 of them. And to do that, it will use this asteroid scriptable object. As I'll say several times throughout this, scriptable objects enable artists and designers to modify things that you're using in your code without getting into your code itself or messing around in the inspector on your components. They are able to mess with something. They're able to set something in the projects pane rather than jumping into the hierarchy and actually finding the individual game object to set the thing on. So this asteroid scriptable object allows the designer to set which models are used as the asteroids, and those are prefabs that are used as the asteroids. It allows them to set like the maximum speed that an asteroid could move at and things like that. Asteroids have an off-screen wrapper, and asteroids spawn many sub-asteroids. So by default, there are 3 starter asteroids, and each starter asteroid spawns 2 smaller asteroids, and each of those 2 spawn 2 smaller asteroids. So they go down 3 different sizes, as is outlined in the requirements doc that you read. Whenever an asteroid is destroyed, it instantiates its own asteroid explosion, and so there could be many of those out there. And next, let's go to the player ship. So the player ship script handles ship movement, jumps, which are when the ship runs into an asteroid and is sort of loses what would normally be called a life in a game. The ship instead jumps to a new location. And then it handles firing, which is instantiation of bullets. So you can see the green line goes down to bullet, where the player ship instantiates a bullet when you fire. And then I wanted the bullets to all be sorted in the hierarchy under a transform named bullet anchor. And rather than build that in the hierarchy and have to create a reference to it, I actually have the bullets instantiate that themselves. So when a bullet is instantiated, the first bullet says, does a bullet anchor exist? And if not, it instantiates that game object and gets its transform, and then the first bullet and all subsequent bullets make themselves children of that bullet anchor. Bullets also register themselves with Asterix so that they can be destroyed at the end of a level, and that is the orange arrow out to the orange circle there. And bullets wrap screens, so they have the off-screen wrapper attached. Continuing with the player ship, ship customization allows us to replace the body and the turret with other ship parts, and that references the ship part dictionary that is part of main camera. And the ship part dictionary is a storage, as I said before, for the bodies and turrets that we will use in the game. And the ship part scriptable object feeds into the ship part dictionary. This, just like the asteroids, there's 2 instances of this scriptable object. One is for all the turrets and the other is for all the bodies. And then tilt with velocity, just when we move the ship, makes it tilt all nice. That's it. That's all it does. It looks nice. It's a nice kind of game feel kind of thing. The player ship wraps, so there's an off-screen wrapper. And then underneath it is a game object called turret rotator. And all this does is it points the turret at the mouse. And then a child of that game object is the actual turret, which is a ship part. There's also the body, which is a ship part. And then there's this close-up camera thing, which you're not going to see in Course 1. But the close-up camera allows us to show that view that you saw in the requirements document. That's the zoomed-in view of the ship while we're choosing what ship parts we want to put on it. So that close-up camera is a child of the player ship, allowing it to move around with the ship. It's active only during certain game states, and it has a background of its own that shows up as a space background behind it. And then finally, I made exhaust particles a separate game object here. The exhaust particles are these fancy particles that you're going to see in Course 2. They're an exhaust trail behind the ship. Again, you can see a picture of it in the requirements doc. And I made them a separate game object here rather than making it a particle component of the player ship, because I wanted to be able to swap it out if it was too much for the mobile version. It turns out it wasn't too much for the mobile version, kind of surprisingly, but that's why I built it that way. Next, we have the GUI and camera space. And I built this graphical user interface in camera space because I wanted it to have its own separate camera and separate canvas. And this is for the ship customization panel. And this enabled me to more easily mesh it with the close-up camera that I told you about just a moment ago. This ship customization panel allows us to sort of set up the initial state of each ship part toggle and track each one of those toggle buttons. And then a ship part toggle is a button that has the name of the turret or body and is on or off based on whether it is the current one selected or not. And there's also a state for when you have not yet earned the right to use that ship part. Those rights, as is listed in the requirements document, are unlocked by gaining achievements. Next up, we have the GUI in screen space overlay. So this is the main GUI for the game. And this includes, at the top, the achievement pop-up. So this is a little thing that'll just kind of pop down, really, and tell you of an achievement and then go away. You've got the play pause toggle, which is just a button that pauses and unpauses. You have the title screen panel, which is the splash screen that says asterisk, and it has the start button. And it has an arrow out to asterisk because it starts asterisk. And this title screen panel script, all it does is it takes the button click on the title screen panel and allows it to call the static start game method on asterisk. The level advance panel is the one that kind of comes in between levels and pops in, says like level 2, and tells you how many asteroids there are going to be in that level. The jumps background image is the cool little frame around the jumps GT, which is a UI text object that shows the number of jumps left. I tend to name these GT still because they used to be called GUI text. Now we use the UI.text, but I still tend to use GT. That's just my personal thing. Score background image, same thing for the score. Score GT, same thing for showing the current score. Delete save is a UI button that is only being used during testing, but that allows you to reset the save data file. And so it goes out to the save game manager and tells it to delete the game file. And then game over panel is the panel that's shown at the end of the game. And so it gains information from asterisk and also sends things back out to it. And it shows your final score and that kind of stuff. And then in this little gray dashed box are things that are exclusive to the mobile version that we'll do at the very end of course 2. And that includes a fire button that's a graphical fire button that you just tap on, and then the mobile tilt control rig, which is part of standard assets and turns tilting of a mobile device into input.getAxis horizontal and input.getAxis vertical. Or in our case, it would be the cross-platform input manager .getAxis horizontal. And that is it. That's my diagram. I hope it's helpful to you. Like I said, yours is probably completely different. But what I want you to do in thinking about how well you did in this challenge is just, did you kind of think of everything? Are there things you didn't think about? A couple of things I did not expect you at all to think about were these additional scripts that I have here. And one is this Vector3 extension script that I wrote. I really like the idea of extension methods, and that allows us to write new methods for existing classes like Vector3. So I just wanted to show you one, and I built this one called component divide that divides, like, given a Vector3, it divides the x of one by the x of the other, and divides the y of one by the y of the other, and divides the z of one by the z of the other. So it's pretty straightforward, but it allowed me to show this really cool extension methods thing. And then there's this great enum flags attribute property drawer. This is a script I found on the Unity forums posted by Akib Sadiq, and it's very cool because it allows us to set the flags for what states exist in the active only during some game states. It allows us to set which game states those are, and this really nice pop-up that mimics the way that the physics layers show up in a pop-up menu with checkboxes. So I wanted to use that. Anyway, that's it for this video. I'm Jeremy Bond. Thank you so much for viewing this, and I look forward to seeing you again. Thanks.